everybody, and welcome back to the Marketing for Learning podcast. I'm here to talk to you today about a topic that I absolutely love and I think is really, really important for L&D to get on board with. We've spoken a lot about branding in the past. There's a whole podcast dedicated to it. And by now, you should realize that having a learning brand is super important to getting this marketing for learning thing right. But today, I want to talk to you about a really specific part of branding, and that's your brand promise. In this podcast, I'm going to go over what a brand promise is, some famous ones that you may or may not already know, and how you can develop your brand promise for your L&D function. So let's get started. So first things first, what is a brand promise? A brand promise is a pledge you're making to your target audience. So to your consumers, your customers, your clients, for you guys, your learners, for want of a better word. What are you promising them that you are going to deliver to them? You are setting an expectation on yourself with your brand promise. What kind of experience can your people expect to be experiencing when they're interacting with you? What can they expect from you? What standard are you going to hold yourself to? That is what your brand promise is. Essentially, for L&D, a brand promise defines who you are as a learning function. You're not the learning and development team. You're a team that wants to fulfill X brand promise. Brand promises aren't necessarily something that you'll ever see in marketing. Sometimes you do. Some brands do externally put their brand promise out there in their ads and such like. But oftentimes a brand promise is something that's quite internal. You might find it on websites when you dig through. But really, it's something to keep marketing teams and organizations as a whole on track and true to what the organization values. So let's look at a few famous brands and their brand promise. You'll notice in these that you've probably never heard these words before, unless you've looked into brand promises before. But they make sense when you piece them together with a brand in question. So the first one is Starbucks. Starbucks' brand promise is to inspire and nurture the human spirit, one person, one cup, one neighborhood at a time. Makes sense. Buying a coffee, nice personal thing, one person, one cup. You have a cup of coffee, you have a cup of peach iced tea. If you saw my recent LinkedIn post, you know that's my favorite drink on the Starbucks menu. But one neighborhood is really interesting. And when I read this, I wasn't surprised, even though I'd never read it before. When I'm in my local Starbucks, there's a big notice board and it's all the things that are happening in Welwyn Garden City. I've seen this in St Albans. I've seen it in quite a few other locations that I've been to. So that's their real connection with the neighborhood. But also, I wonder if you've ever noticed that when you're in when you're in Starbucks in a big city, you might see some merchandise related to that city. So I've seen it a lot in London, and I never really thought much of it. I grew up in London, so I've been going into Starbucks since I was about 11. I've never really paid attention to it. But then when I went on holiday to Canada and I was in a Starbucks in Toronto, I saw mugs that had Toronto on them. I was like, oh, that's really interesting. And Canadians are the friendliest people in the world. So when I was having a chit chat with the barista in there, she was saying, oh, yeah, they're all over the place and it's related to the town or city that you're in. And then I started noticing it here. So again, Starbucks are making a real affinity with the neighborhoods that they are operating in. So that brand promise is not a surprise at all, is it? Another example is Nike. Their brand promise is if you have a body, you are an athlete. That instantly relates to almost anybody that has ever bought Nike products before. I am sat here right now wearing a pair of Nike trainers. I suppose in some way I bought them to go to the gym in. So I suppose that does make me an athlete. It makes sense. It also shows that they're not willing to compromise based on who you are as a person. it says a lot about their brand, and you do see it reflected in quite a lot of their marketing. The one that comes to mind for me is the Like a Girl campaign. Run like a girl, walk like a girl. It was a really, really big thing, probably about 5 years ago now. It might have even been longer ago than that. It was a fantastic campaign to get women into sports and into activity and an active lifestyle. And it absolutely reflected Nike's brand promise. And finally, Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola is always used as a pinnacle of marketing excellence. So let's see what you think of their brand promise. Coca-Cola's brand promise is to inspire moments of optimism and uplift. Okay, that might feel a little bit weird for a fizzy drinks company. What has drinking a fizzy drink got to do with optimism and uplift? But if you think about their marketing and all of their communications, it really does ring true. It is a red thread through everything they do. And if you think about that crack of the Coke can and that first sip of an ice cold can of Coke, you kind of get the uplift thing there as well, don't you? So they're 3 examples. And maybe, as I said, if you've never looked into brand promises before, you may have never heard them despite knowing the brands quite well. But it's really clear to see that actually, with these brand promises, it's keeping them true to themselves. When you have a brand promise, you can sense check your ideas, your marketing campaigns, your emails, your posters, your banner adverts against your brand promise. Does this ring true to the thing we have promised everybody we will do? And that is one of the main reasons why L&D need brand promises. Brand promises help L&D commit to a cause. Of course, you're in L&D. You want to help other people. I saw an L&D on LinkedIn today. I know she listens to the podcast. I wonder if she'll call me out for this. But her tagline on LinkedIn is because people matter. That sounds like a brand promise to me. Making a commitment and a pledge to your people does one key thing if you're consistently delivering on it. And that builds trust. We know trust is a hugely important aspect of marketing. And if your people don't trust what you're saying and what you're doing, the chances are it's going to be hard to get them to engage with your learning at all. Building trust should be at the forefront of your marketing for learning efforts, and having a brand promise to hold yourself accountable to is really important in doing that. So, how do we create a brand promise? Really, it's just 3 steps. The first one is not a surprise at all. Think about your audience. What do they want from you? What are they going to get from embracing your learning experience, getting involved with your learning program, taking your learning intervention? What is in it for them? What are you giving them? What's the promise you're making them? Are you giving them exceptional learning experiences every time? Are you helping them grow and flourish and enhance their skill set? Are you helping them achieve their professional goals, the dreams they always dreamt of? What are you promising to them? What are they going to get out of working with you? Then the second step is to consider your touch points. If you've embraced digital learning, chances are you've got an LMS, LXP, something similar. You have a learning platform. What's the experience of that like? If you're promising your people that they are going to get the best learning experience of their life, and then your LMS is absolutely pants, there's going to be a bit of a power struggle here. People aren't going to believe your brand promise because the platform's rubbish, and then they aren't getting the best possible experience. And then you're not building trust, you're actually hampering trust. People aren't going to believe you because you've fallen short on your brand promise. Think about the communication methods you use. Are they consistent? Are they appealing? Are they attractive? You want to make sure that everything is really realistic. Don't overpromise to your audience. If you promise the world's best learning experience, you've got to deliver it. And if you haven't got the tech and the support to help you deliver it, you're not going to be able to. Don't overpromise here. Be realistic in what your brand promise is. Because it needs to be something that you as a team also believe in. If you as a team have promised to deliver the world's best learning experience, but you as a team also hate your learning management system, you're not going to believe that you can deliver the world's best learning experience. So you're not going to hold yourself accountable to that expectation you have set upon yourself. Your brand promise needs to be something your entire team can be on board with and believe in. And lastly, the third step in creating your brand promise is to keep it simple. Make sure it's something you can all remember. Make sure it's something that's catchy, that keeps people on path, that keeps people working towards those set values that you have as a learning team. So there you have it. Brand promises are a really simple part of a really big piece of the marketing for learning puzzle. Of course, there's a lot more to branding than your brand promise, but your brand promise is what's going to keep you on track. It's what's going to hold you accountable, and it's what's going to set the expectations in your learners' minds. If you have any questions about creating your own brand promise and you think you might need a little bit of help, or if you've created a brand promise and you're like, is this any good? Feel free to drop me a message. I honestly love talking to you guys about the ways you're implementing things you've learned off this podcast. It honestly brings me so much joy. So if you do want to talk to me, drop me a LinkedIn message. You know where to find me. And if not, enjoy creating your brand promise, and I'll see you on the next podcast.